And let me say good afternoon, good morning, good evening to each of you tuning in from around the world. I'm Katherine Jansen, Kate, the editor of Speculum, the Medieval Academy of America's Journal of Medieval Studies. We're delighted to have so many of you joining with us today. I know that we had over 350 registrations. We'll see whether we have that many participants. This webinar, the goal of this webinar is to demystify publishing, the publishing process at Speculum, particularly for early career scholars. And although we'll talk specifically about the structure of Speculum's operations, our hope is that what we say here today sheds light on academic publishing in general. But before I begin, I'd like to thank Renata Blumenfeld-Kosinski, President, and Lisa Fagan-Davis, Executive Director of the Medieval Academy of America, for greenlighting and hosting this event, and Chris Cole, who's hiding behind that Medieval Academy of America logo, who is running the technical part of this presentation today. I'm also grateful to Hussein Fancy, who suggested that Speculum do our own event instead of waiting for conferences. For those who have to duck out early, we are taping the webinar and it will be posted to the Medieval Academy of America website. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions rather than the chat. The chat will really be used for technical purposes. We hope we don't have to use the chat. We will turn to Q&A after all of our presentations. Now, as you see from the multiple Zoom boxes on the screen, Speculum is not a one-woman band. I have here with me the associate and assistant editors, along with representatives from the editorial board, which has 12 members, and from the book review board, which has 20 members, covering all fields of medieval studies. We also have our publisher from the University of Chicago Press here today, and I'll introduce each of them before they speak. Now, the first part of our program will roughly follow the journal format, presenting the journal's 3 major sections: the articles, the book reviews, and the back matter, which consists of books received and short and brief notices. I'll speak for about 15 minutes, giving you an overview of the Speculum process for articles, which is really my domain, although of course I oversee the entire journal. Taylor McCall, our associate editor, will introduce you to the book review operation. And Carol Anderson, our assistant editor, will familiarize you with the back matter of the journal, among many other things. She wears many hats. And then in the second part of the program, our editors, Cecilia Gaposchkin and Whitaker, who will be joining us momentarily, Núria Silleras-Fernández and Lawrence Warner will speak from their perspectives on the boards. And finally, our publisher, Kari Rohn, will discuss, among other things, the University of Chicago Press's open access policy for all of you international participants. So let me begin by giving you an overview of the process of publishing an article with Speculum. That is from submission to publication. And then I'll turn to the particulars of preparing an article where I'll offer suggestions. Let us begin with an overview of the process of publishing an article with Speculum from submission to publication. Then I'll turn to the particulars of preparing an article where I'll offer suggestions. Authors make their submissions through the editorial manager platform run by the University of Chicago Press, our publisher. Chris Cole gathers up the new submissions and sends them to me, whereupon I assign them to the editorial board members for an initial determination of suitability for publication and the recommendation of peer reviewers. We then follow a policy of double-blind peer review. The author's identity is not known to the readers evaluating the article, and the author does not know the identity of the readers. The peer reviewers then write up the reports giving their detailed assessment of the article. They are also asked to make recommendations of decline, revise, and resubmit, or accept. And let me make an additional editorial comment here. Neither peer reviewers, nor for that matter, book reviewers are paid. They do it as a service to their profession. And for that, I'm extremely grateful to them. And I'm also deeply impressed by the hard work and the quality of the reviews that they return to us. Almost inevitably, their feedback contributes to making a submission better. Now, once I receive their reports, I try to highlight for the author what I view are the most important points made by the reviewers. This initial stage of the process, however, can be lengthy, and our turnaround time has certainly ticked up during the pandemic as people are spread more thinly professionally. And though we aim for 3 months, it has been known to take up to 6 months for a first response. The decision most often given is a revise and resubmit decision, in which authors are invited to revise in light of the reader's reports and resubmit the article. We don't have a deadline for resubmissions. You do it on your own time and resubmit when you are ready. It is then sent out again to peer reviewers. It's not uncommon for an article to go through the revise and resubmit process at least a couple of times. And though it may sound arduous, many authors themselves tell me that they have benefited immensely from the process. And because of it, they've been able to improve their articles significantly. For the sake of argument, let's say that after a couple of rounds of revision, your article is accepted for publication in the journal. You should know, first of all, that there's a queue because we have a lot of accepted articles already in the pipeline. Ordinarily, an article will not be published for a year upon acceptance. Currently, the journal's issues are filled through April 2022, so that's a year out. So if you need a speedy publication of your work, please be aware that Speculum may not be the right venue for you. However, if you do have the time to wait, I believe that we can deliver what in the business world they call a value proposition. You've already heard about the form that it takes in the peer review process, which ordinarily helps to refine an article's originality and strength. But as authors, you also benefit from it in the editorial process, which I want to walk you through briefly now. 6 months prior to publication, you will hear from our assistant editor who will begin formatting and fact-checking the article. You'll hear more of what that means from Carol herself. The article then moves on to our copy editor, who is not here today, but who works with you on bringing the article into Chicago style. After that, the article lands on my desk for a last check before it moves on to composition and typesetting, after which you, the author, receive a set of proofs to review. Then the issue is put together as a whole, and the staff, including our proofreader, reads multiple drafts of the entire issue before it is put to bed. So all in all, an author will have at least 5 sets of eyes on your article during the editorial process alone. And frankly, you'd be amazed at how much we catch during this process. So through our editorial process, coupled with the peer review process by specialists in the field, it is a good argument for publishing in Speculum. Now, in the remaining time that I have, I want to turn to your initial submissions and to this journal and to other journals, and offer some suggestions and pointers. Much of what I say may appear obvious to some of you, but you'd be surprised at how many authors do not take these preliminary steps before submitting their essays. So I'd ask you to read the journal's mission statement, sometimes called its scope and its aims and scope statement. Read how the journal frames its scope, its chronological boundaries, and the kind of articles it aims to publish. I've highlighted the most important pieces from our statement, and you'll see how we look for interdisciplinary articles that will appeal to a broad cross-section of medievalists. A journal's mission statement offers guidance on scope, which may be very different from what you presume or maybe what you remember about a journal. There may be a number of reasons for this. Perhaps you're not a regular reader of the journal in the first place. Perhaps it's a journal where someone told you to publish, but you're not familiar with it. Or 3, perhaps the journal has reframed its vision. Whatever the reason, do your research on the journal's website. You may find that your piece is not a good fit for the journal and would be better placed elsewhere. We frequently receive articles that are entirely out of our remit. And for scholars who are on a clock, you don't want to waste your valuable time submitting an article to a journal, any journal, only to have it denied because it's not the right fit in the first place. So by all means, do your research on your article to see if it fits the journal's current profile, which certainly could have changed since last time you looked. Websites change all the time, including our own. As I noted, Speculum was founded in 1926 as an interdisciplinary research journal whose mandate is to publish papers that cross disciplinary boundaries and to publish those that will have a wide appeal to medievalists. And as you've seen, that's what our scope tries to convey. So if yours is a very narrowly construed paper, or if it employs language that is too technical for a more general audience of medievalists, it's probably best to think about a more specialized journal as your venue. Or alternatively, I would suggest that you go to your colleagues, your medievalist colleagues outside of your direct field, ask them to read the paper and to help you make the piece more accessible to a multidisciplinary audience. All journals have guidelines for submission. So, and they are usually fairly explicit, and they're not all the same. So some journals want your submission to be in footnoted, some want endnotes, some have hard page limits, some do not. If they do, you do well to abide by them. Some journals have very specific guidelines on formatting your essay and how to submit images and tables and appendices. So again, read the guidelines, inform yourself, and try to abide by them. My third point here is to anonymize. One important item that often results in an article being sent back to an author upon submission is that they've forgotten to anonymize it for the blind peer review process. That means removing any headnotes with acknowledgements because that's often a dead giveaway of your identity. We also ask you to remove all reference to yourself in your footnotes. And it's not that you have to remove your own work, but just don't identify it as my book or my article. And if you don't do this, one of our overstressed staff will have to send the article back to you, and then you will have to repeat the submission process. My fourth point here is to pay attention to your English prose. If you're a non-native English speaker, it's highly recommended that you corral a mother tongue English speaker to read over and correct your text before submission. Now, no matter how good your spoken English is, it's rare that it's fluent enough to write polished academic prose. And an article written in poor English will most likely be declined at the level of the editorial board or the reader's reports. And it's certainly way beyond the copy editor's remit to rewrite articles into acceptable English prose. And even if you are a native English speaker, have someone read your article before submission. They'll find mistakes and infelicities of style that you just haven't seen. I would always say that it's also a good idea to read your paper aloud. You'll catch a whole nother round of typos and phrasing problems and redundancies that you just didn't see when you were reading through it silently. So all this is to say is that you want your article to make the best impression possible with the specialist readers, and they will be irritated, no matter how good the article is, if they're distracted by typos and issues with grammar and syntax and messy footnotes, for example. So those issues also send up red flags about the care taken in the preparation of the article. Finally, my last point, which may again seem obvious, is that a mature piece of scholarship is one that is structured by a strong argument about its subject. No matter how interesting your research or data is, it does not speak for itself. You have to speak for it with a clear and compelling argument. Peer reviewers may be able to help you strengthen your argument, but they need something to work with from the beginning. Journalists are always warned, don't bury the lead, meaning don't bury the most important part of the story within the details. And frankly, researchers in the humanities would do well to abide by that suggestion. So do ensure that you foreground your argument along with the contribution that the article will make to its field in the first page or two. Do make sure that it structures your paper and that you return to it in your conclusion. Hard-pressed readers are generally not eager to go on a hunt for the paper's argument. And certainly, as I tell my own students, a scholarly paper is a genre in its own right, and it usually it usually does best if it's not borrowing from the form of a mystery novel. So I'll finish up by reminding you that Speculum does have a rather low acceptance rate. We only publish 20 to 25 articles a year. And not every article is right for the journal, but there are many journals out there for you. And I want to end by sharing my own story with Speculum. I submitted an article to Speculum when I was a graduate student. It was declined. Not the right fit, said the editor. Well, I published that article elsewhere and still feel that it was Speculum's loss. So if you do receive a decline notice, I'd advise you to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, maybe have a drink, and revise and resubmit elsewhere. It's not the end of the world, nor does it mean that you can't submit a future article to the journal. That's what I did, and the second time was the charm. So with that, let me say that we look forward to your future submissions, and thank you. And here I just want to flash up on the screen before I take my PowerPoint off. Here is the contact information for the staff that you'll hear from today. This is all on the web as well. So thank you. All right, now, first let me stop sharing. All right, there we are. And I want to turn things over to our associate editor, Taylor McCall, who received her PhD in art history from the University of Cambridge. She now runs our book review operation. Taylor.
Thank you, Kate. I'm just going to share my screen. Like a good art historian, I have some visuals, so okay. Okay, so as Kate mentioned, my name is Taylor McCall. I am the associate editor of Speculum. And while Kate deals mostly with the first half of the journal, which are the articles, my purview is the second half of each article or each issue, which is made up of the book reviews and what we call the back matter. So the book reviews, I've just included one here. Book reviews, we publish about 70 to 80 in each issue. They take up the bulk of the second half of each volume. And the back matter is a little bit shorter, but still very important. And Carol will talk more about both of these in her presentation, but just briefly, all the books that we get into the office, which are increasingly digital copies in addition to some hard copies, they all appear in books received. This is a list. We compile our own bibliographical notices for each of these. And these books are all then sorted into lists based on general subject matter. And we have an expert who oversees each list, which are our wonderful book review editors. And these might be pretty broad. So art history is a whole list, but then we have more specialized lists, like one for Iberian studies and one for Middle English, for instance. And then brief notices is a smaller part of each issue, but it's specifically for edited collections that we decide not to review, but want to provide our readers with a better idea of the contents of these books. So we list each author and their essay titles within each of these works. So just to go over book reviews in general, as I said, 70 to 80 per issue. They are about 900 words each for a single book and about 1,500 words for either multiple volumes or sometimes we pair two books that are thematically similar together and ask for a review that sort of compares them. And for those we get 1,500 words. The book review editors assess these publications that we get in and determine who they would like to invite based on their areas of expertise to review these publications. And I then invite them. And this is, we especially welcome expressions of interest in reviewing particular publications. and just general areas of expertise. So especially for earlier career scholars who might be interested in writing a review for us, we encourage you to please get in touch and let us know. So just a handy little graph here, life cycle of a book review. The book comes into the office, either a hard copy or an ebook. We write up the bibliographical data and sort the book by subject. The book review editor looks over the books assigned to them and recommends people to invite to review them. The associate editor, which is me, then invites these reviewers through our online system. Once assigned, we send out the book. The reviewer writes the review and submits it to me. The review is then checked by me, and for content checked by the book review editor before going to the copy editor. And then we begin the publication process, which is typesetting. The proofs are sent to me and to the author for a final check, and then publication. So this generally takes, if things are going relatively smoothly, usually takes about a year from the time the book comes into the office to the actual publication of the review, but often can take a lot longer than that. So on average, I would say it takes a month or two to find a suitable reviewer for a particular work. And then the reviewers have 4 months from receipt of the work to submit their review back to me. And then it takes probably about another couple of months to go through me and to the book review editor and then to the copy editor. And then it takes another probably 2 months or so to actually publish the review. So, but of course, snags happen all the time in each sort of area of this process. So it often can take a lot longer than that. And a question that we get is often, why wasn't my book reviewed? And sometimes this is because our book review editors decide that maybe it is a little too specialist for Speculum readership, or perhaps we have tried, maybe we've sent it out to a reviewer who never returned it, which unfortunately happens. And sometimes we invite 10 different people to review a book and no one agrees. So we just at a certain point have to let some of those books go. So to close, I'm just gonna go over what makes a good review for us. Because they're only 900 words, clarity and concision are obviously big parts of what makes a good review. We encourage a balanced assessment of the merits and the drawbacks of each publication. And careful adherence to our style specifications is always really nice because it does take up time for me to reformat everything. And we discourage long lists of errata. So lists of typos is not something that we're interested in publishing. We don't publish reviews with footnotes or extensive scholarly apparatus. It's meant to more be a sort of smoother read. And finally, we do not accept reviews that are sent to us without an invitation. So someone's written a review of something and they send it to us. We don't accept those kinds of reviews. You have to be invited to review. So I hope that has answered most questions about the book review process, but I look forward to any questions that you might have, and please do get in touch. This is my personal email address, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. And now on to our assistant editor, Carol Anderson, who received her PhD in history from the Catholic University of America. As I said, she wears multiple hats at the journal, including compiling the back matter of the journal. So, Carol, and
Thank you so much, Kate. Oops. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to share with you my different responsibilities at Speculum. So I'm Carol Anderson, the editor or the assistant editor. And so I have a list here of my responsibilities. So I wear many hats. And so let me just talk briefly about the first couple that are on the screen here. I train any new staff members and oversee the solicitation of publishers for new books that we might be interested in reviewing. Some publishers do send us review copies of their own accord, but for others, we're required to ask them to send us copies. So this is one of the things I coordinate doing is asking publishers to send books. Another of my duties is to oversee the compiling and formatting of what is known as the back matter of the journal. And so then this consists, as Taylor said, of the brief notices and the books received. So I oversee the writing up of every bibliographic entry for every book that's relevant to medieval studies that we have received. And so then that long list becomes the books received list. And also any brief notices that are directed to be written up, I make sure that they're written up in the back as well. I also have a hand in the process for both the articles and the book reviews, and these are the tasks where I have the most contact with article authors. So my responsibility regarding the articles that will appear in each issue is to perform what is known as fact-checking before they are sent to the copy editor. And so what this entails is confirming with the author their final abstract and their byline, formatting each article for production. So that's things like changing the font, the spacing, the margins. I also read the body of the text to check the names and dates that are mentioned. And finally, I review the footnotes. And so most of my time is actually spent on article footnotes, where I check each citation to make sure that its information is complete and accurate. So I fix errors, inconsistencies, and make sure that citations are rendered in Speculum's house style. What's actually very helpful for the whole process, as far as I'm concerned, is when authors have composed their footnotes according to our online style guide, which I have a link listed up there. And this is to make this stage in the process go much quicker. Then I can send it off to the copy editor if, the less I have to change, the quicker it will get to them. So before I begin even fact-checking your article, I also look through Editorial Manager to make sure that the author has uploaded all the necessary components for the article's publication. So let me elaborate on that here for you. So the final version of the article, first of all, must be uploaded before I can begin checking it. So make sure you've done that. The most important supplemental document that must be uploaded to Editorial Manager is the signed publication agreement. And so this must be submitted with every article that's going to be published. I need that. And if you're including any images, tables, graphs, anything that will, any sort of image material that will need to appear, it also needs to be uploaded to Editorial Manager individually as either a TIFF file or a JPEG file. And if the author does not own their visual materials that they are using, then they also need to upload permission forms or a proof of purchase to use the image. So this must be uploaded for each image that requires permission for publication. And frankly, even images that are in the public domain, we would like some sort of confirmation or some sort of documentation saying that they're in the public domain, just so that we know if we have questions. Finally, authors must upload a separate list of all the caption information that will accompany any images, tables, or graphs. And having all the necessary components uploaded as soon as possible once the article is accepted, this helps this process go a lot smoother, and you won't have me chasing you via email for these additional components. So COVID-19 hasn't really changed how we handle articles so much, but the process for book reviews has changed quite a bit, at least from the back end. So I become more involved in sending books directly to reviewers whenever possible. So from February 8th, 2020 to February 7th, 2021, we have signed almost 300 books, which is great. And since the pandemic began, we have been requesting digital books from publishers for reviewers when we have been unable to mail the ones that are in our office. So I'm involved at the beginning of the review life cycle, you could say, right after someone has accepted the invitation to review a book. So Taylor alerts me to any assigned books that we have physical copies of in our Boston office. And I've been in charge of procuring digital copies for these books whenever it's possible. As you can see from that same date range, we've obtained digital versions for more than half of the books that we've assigned. Increasingly, though, we have switched to accepting digital copies from publishers so that we can write up entries for the book's received list. And then what I've been responsible for doing is requesting print copies to be sent directly to reviewers. So that's actually been very convenient. Arranging for ebooks or publisher-sent print copies is when I come into contact with contributors to the review process of the journal the most. So what is very helpful for me is when reviewers confirm that they have received a print or digital copy, or if they let me know if they have not received something after 4 to 6 weeks, because sometimes accidents happen, books get lost in the mail, etc. So I'm always happy to check up on orders if reviewers request it or want to know where their digital copy is. I'm happy to do that. So thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Now I would like you all to have the benefit from the perspective of a few of our editors. So we'll turn first to the editorial board, and we'll hear first from Cecilia Gaposchkin, professor of history at Dartmouth College, a member of the editorial board. Cecilia.
Thanks, thanks, Kate. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just begin by saying that the job of the editorial board is really to support Kate in her work on a variety of issues about the shape of the journal and its mission. And one of the most interesting things that we do is do a sort of first pass on a series of articles that come in. So after Kate receives an article, she will ask two, usually, members of the board who have some, we come from all different areas within medieval studies. So we have art historians, Byzantinists, literary historians, and I'm a historian of different areas and different stripes. And so we come in and we'll do, usually two readers will do a first pass of read to figure out or to advise Kate. And our role is only and always advisory about whether she should pursue asking for formal reviews from outside readers. I should say this is a wonderful, I mean, it's very interesting. I learn a lot from doing it. I'm impressed, somewhat humbled by the amount and the sheer scope of and a lot of the quality of the scholarship that's coming in. So our job is to read not as specialists, but as interesting, general medievalists, a series of articles to see whether it's worthy or it's worth pursuing, and really asking people to invest their time reviewing it. These assignments, these first reads, they're not heavy reads. I read an article once and try to get a sense of whether it is an appropriate submission for scholarship. There's a series of kind of broad rubrics or guidelines or questions. Kate, would it be okay if I put those into the chat just to give people a sense of what we're reading for? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay, let me just, except for I don't know how to put it into chat. I'm in chat and.
Oh, just read them out, Cecilia, because
Okay, well,
I wasted so much time getting my PowerPoint up there. Yeah.
Well, so the one of the questions is it too narrow for Speculum? And if it is, can it be opened up? Is it framed in a way of interest to readers outside of the very specific area that the scholar is coming from? Does it have broad appeal? This is an important one. Is the research original or is it derivative? Is it making a new argument? Does the article introduce a new methodology into the field? Is the English publishable? Does it, this is the thing that we're really looking for, does the article have the potential to impact the conversation in its field? And if the topic is primarily non-Western, and I note that there's some questions about this in the chat, does it have a comparative dimension? And can it speak to that broad audience? So those are the sort of broad things that we're looking for as we read. I will say that I probably suggest that Kate follow up or continue on, push through, I'd say 1 out of about 50% of the articles I read. The ones that I don't are what I'm looking for usually is, just is it scholarship? Is there research in it? Is there actual archival or textual, whatever? Is there an actual basis for the argument? We do get some things that seem to be I don't know, meditations or summaries on fields, or summaries on second sort of reductive or derivative approaches to fields, really based on secondary scholarships. We're going to be looking to see whether the author is obviously rooted and competent in the research languages that would be required to do research in that field. So that's one broad. Those are, they come in with some regularity. That is not the overwhelming number, sort of amount of the ones that we would do a sort of an early, not rejecting it, but sort of discouraging response. Really, the area where I find most frequently I'm often torn, because they're interesting pieces, but they're very specific to a subfield. An article that's an analysis of a single text in a one of the languages, an article that is very specific to a small or narrow phenomenon and isn't either reaching broadly and ambitiously in its own field or across fields. And often those look like wonderful, they're often quite interesting, they're often very competent, but they just feel like they belong more in a specialist journal, the audience for which is specifically the audience that the author is principally in dialogue with. And so those are really the two reasons I would suggest to Kate that she not really waste somebody else's time. I will often suggest reviewers if I know the field at all, or I have a sense of who might be good, and I will sometimes suggest alternative journals for an author to pursue if Kate, follows my advice. She will get more than my advice. Usually 2 of us will read it, and of course Kate is free to make her own determination. The other 2 things I would say is I would like to reiterate that just from a different perspective, as somebody who submitted to Speculum, the rigor of the process that Speculum puts its articles through has led to an early article being rejected, which, as Kate says, was at an early career stage. That was dispiriting. But in the pieces that I have pushed through with Speculum, the rigor, they've taken a long time to come out. And the rigor that they've undergone, I've been very grateful for, because it's clear to me that the pieces are just stronger and better, and I'm just thinking more proud of them when they do come out. So that's all I have. I'm obviously here, and I can return in discussion if
Great.
Anybody has anything for me. Thank you, Kate,
Thanks.
for the invitation.
Thank you, Cecilia. Now I'd like to ask Cord. Cord is one of the newest members on the board. I guess you've been there on the board for almost a year now, so you're not so new. But in any event, Cord may be able to add, will be able to add a different perspective. Cord Whitaker is Associate Professor of English at Wellesley College and a member of the editorial board.
Thanks so much, Kate. I'm happy to be here. And as a member of the editorial board, I just want to reiterate and perhaps emphasize several of the points that Cecilia just made. It is of paramount importance that that those who would publish in Speculum remember the interdisciplinary purview of the journal. It should, what you send us should have broad interest from medievalists, even as it should be engaging profoundly with methods that are based in a particular field. So we're really looking for pieces that balance well their depth of study, as Cecilia mentioned, their new, often archival research, but should be balancing those with an interest in, with an interaction and engagement with methods and approaches that are found in multiple subsections, multiple subdisciplines of medieval studies. So that's something you really want to give attention to when you're thinking about, is this the right piece to send to Speculum? And I will say, for my own part, when I'm reviewing a piece, as Cecilia mentioned, our first reads they're not heavy reads, but I do tend to look for a clear and concise thesis, a statement of argument that is readily identifiable. We don't want, I think Kate put it well, no one wants to go hunting for the argument. So that's important to remember. And in fact, it's also important that the abstract state that argument quite clearly and directly, while it also highlights the evidence. It's really interesting when I'm looking at abstracts, I'll often see that somebody maybe states the argument clearly in the abstract, but doesn't say much about what evidence they'll be using in the essay to back up that argument. Or sometimes I'll find that maybe there's a lot about the evidence, but the argument doesn't get clearly stated in the abstract. So looking for that balance is important too. And along with that, another tip, one of the things we're looking for is a signal that great care has been taken in producing the article. Kate mentioned this with reference to proofing and copy editing before you send it out. But this is also true in the relation of the abstract to the essay. It's many of you would perhaps be surprised at how often the abstract that the author has presented us is simply the first paragraph of the essay. Now, the first paragraph of the essay may be well written and may do a lot of the things it needs to do. But when I see that they're the same thing, the first thing that signals to me is, okay, there wasn't great attention, or it appears that there wasn't great attention given to how to present this piece, to give us its elevator speech, if you will. When I do see an abstract that hits all the necessary points, it gives me the thesis, tells me what the evidence is going to be, and I'll also add this, tells me what methodological intervention the essay is making. And it does those things in a way that's compelling, gives me a good sense of where this essay is going and why this essay matters in the abstract. And that's a different paragraph than an opening paragraph of the essay that still achieves, right? That opening paragraph of the essay should still achieve most of those things too, but in the vein of pulling me into the essay, as opposed to the vein of showing me why I should want to read the essay on the whole. So I encourage you to think clearly and even quite creatively about how those two pieces of what you submit should differ. Let's see. I'll also say, it is perhaps a tall order to ask that a piece be both multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, broadly of interest to medievalists working in various fields, as well as innovative in its theoretical and methodological approaches. But that is for that it also be innovative, it would be making a clear and explicitly stated intervention
in its theoretical and methodological approaches, and that those approaches seem organically related to, they seem to be fitting for the evidence and argument, that it's clear how they build upon previous scholarship, all while very clearly bespeaking their interventions. So I hope that's helpful. Um, you know, it is a tall order. That's one reason why I think publishing in Speculum um, is such a wonderful thing. Um, it's why the journal is known for its rigor. And as a member of the editorial board, I want to say that we on the editorial board really appreciate your interest in publishing in Speculum. And your we appreciate your willingness to partner with us as, you know, all us folks who want to keep our field strong and make it even stronger, to partner with us in these rigorous processes that make for a better journal and make for a better field. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cord. Now we're going to add the perspective of our book review editors, or two of our book review editors. And I want to turn first to Núria Silleras-Fernández, Associate Professor of Spanish and Portuguese at the University of Colorado Boulder. Thank you, Núria.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. So I have had the honor of working as review editor for the section of Medieval Iberia since last year, and I am expected to serve for 3 years. It has been a pleasure working with Carol and Taylor. I mostly work with Taylor now. So I am going to explain you what I do, okay? So Speculum, as Taylor was mentioning, receives all the books. And at that point, Taylor compiles a list of books on my area for me. And then I had to look for a reviewer. So when I look for a reviewer, I take into account 3 main factors. The first one is expertise. I look for a scholar who works on the same period or on the same topic, or even on the same topic and same period, if at all possible. And I do this because I want someone who knows the primary and secondary sources that the author in question has used for the book. So expertise is my number 1 factor. Then, of course, I also try to find someone who doesn't have a conflict of interest with the author of the book. For example, a dissertation supervisor should not review a book written by his or her student. Or, for example, you should not review your partner's work. So I try to find someone who doesn't have a conflict. And last but not least, something very important is like willingness to do the work, because we are all awfully busy. And sometimes I have identified the perfect reviewer for a book, but that person is unwilling to do the review because either he or she is very busy or because they don't like to review books. You'll be surprised. Some people don't enjoy writing reviews. So this is also a problem. And something very important also is to keep in mind that reviews are very important for authors. So if at all possible, I take into account the reviewers' track record, because even though we are all very busy, it's very important that the review gets submitted on time, so that author gets help in his or her career. So after I have identified the reviewer in question, Taylor takes over again. She gets in contact with that person and offers the book to be reviewed. If the scholar agrees to review the book, then I am done. If that scholar doesn't agree, then I had to start all over again, and I had to try to identify another reviewer. So when you are writing your review, this is what I think that matters. So the review has to be clear. The review has to be critical, but also informative. The reviewer has to keep in mind the readership and explain the main points made by the book, the main arguments. The review has to explain how the book is structured and what sources or materials have been used in that work. The criticism has to be constructive. The reviewer has to remember that the idea is not to explain what he or she would have done, but what the author in question has done. Sometimes this is actually hard. In my short time in this position, all the reviews that I have received were all very good. So I haven't had major problems with any of them. So a few months after the review has been requested, I get the review back. Taylor takes over at the beginning and she makes sure that the review is well written. And at that point, she sends the reviews to me. So to the best of my ability, I had to make sure that the review doesn't, that I had to try to catch any errors. And I had to make sure that everything that is said actually is factual. And then is when I am done. So the process is completed. I send the review back to Taylor, and then she takes over again, and then she sends my comments, if I have comments, to the reviewer. And I don't see the reviews again until they are actually published. So this is what I do, and I hope that you have found my presentation helpful. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Núria. I found it very helpful. Thank you. And now we want to hear from the perspective of Lawrence Warner, who we saw in the chat, who we've heard from already in the chat. Lawrence is a professor of medieval English at King's College, London, also serving on the Book Review Board.
Hello, thank you, Kate, and thanks, Núria, for covering so much of the material. Yeah, I answered a few things in the chat which really are Taylor's remit and will be more adequately answered later on. So I've left that. Although I don't think there's anything wrong with what I said. I will address actually some of the, when I was planning to address a couple of the issues that arose there. I'll just fill out, I mean, Núria has given such a good overview of how the process works. I thought I'd make a couple of points. Don't be afraid if you're interested and have a PhD in hand, because that is the general requirement to review for Speculum. Don't be afraid to put forth interest in reviewing, either by an email or whatever to the appropriate review editor for the section or to Taylor. We're always looking for people who are happy to review. That's already a sign that there's an energy there. Whereas sometimes if we approach someone, even if they say yes, the energy just never materializes. If you are approached for a review and can't do it, please do suggest who you think might be good. I find that very helpful when that happens. A weird thing about Speculum book reviewing, now that I'm on the other side and seeing how it works, I mean, I've been in a position, I think that the style guide actually lists my first book as like how to list a book, and it was reviewed in Speculum and great, but my second book never showed up. Now I wasn't wounded or anything, but now I can see exactly how that can happen. There are situations, partly where because it's Speculum, where we go for kind of the rock star and get an instant acceptance in the review is in hand within weeks, and I'm just amazed that this was able to happen. And as Taylor said earlier, there are other times when it goes through 1, 2, 3, up to 12 or 13, and it doesn't necessarily mean the book isn't attractive. It's just everyone says they're too busy or whatever, and some books just fall through the cracks that way. So don't read anything too much into it if your book isn't reviewed. Certainly have your publisher send a copy to Taylor if you want it to be reviewed. Yeah, as far as like finding reviewers, I actually really enjoy if it's a field within Middle English that I'm not as familiar with. I enjoy, frankly, I'll type in some Google searches with 5 or 6 keywords to see what shows up, because often it turns out that so-and-so whose work you might know in this capacity wrote 3 or 4 articles about 10 years ago and would really be a great person to catch up with the field and provide. So we are seeking out and doing research ourselves to see who's available. And I've found some very interesting people that I'd never heard of before, because I didn't, about, say, medical treatises that have just been edited into Middle English, which that's a whole field that's fascinating, and I'm learning about who's done great work there. So we are actively seeking things, and we welcome hearing from you. We want the best reviews. Núria covered most of this. We want them to be pithy. They should be summational regarding the contents. People should have a clue what's in the book, but also the place in the field. There should be a sense of whether it's, of whether you think the book is valuable, or where the value inheres. As you know, when you skim over a review very quickly, you want to get a sense of what you're in for. Is this the major statement of the last 10 years, or, oh, it could do better? Don't be too coy about that. We want it to be honest and generous. You need to remember that these are people's livelihoods and their lives in a lot of places. They'll welcome constructive criticism. That doesn't mean never be harsh. Sometimes harshness is okay, but it needs to be non-personal for sure. Do not bug editors about the status of your book and whether it's, I think once or twice people have asked me, and I might have said vaguely, we're hoping to get it reviewed, but basically don't put us in that kind of position. We're not allowed to give any information about who's reviewing, about its status, for all sorts of reasons, and just basically silently let it happen. We're not in that situation as editors. That's just a little bit of tips. And a final thing I wanted to say about the status of reviewing by early career researchers. I've heard it a number of times, early career researchers should not review because of political issues, and that you might fall into a battlefield that, oh, you're tarred forever if you gave so-and-so a negative review. I personally would take that with a grain of salt. I think the more pressing issue is whether you should be spending your time elsewhere than whether it's political. This notion of politics I find quite kind of irritating, I've got to say. But the notion of time, that is, should you really be spending your intellectual energy writing in the archives and working on your thesis, is the issue. But even there, it's more a question of whether this book review is going to get your thesis going. Well, in Speculum's case, not your thesis, but your project, your book, because often book reviewing can be galvanizing. You really, in a sense, you shouldn't be reviewing a book unless it is the kind of thing that you are part of the conversation and that will be part of your scholarly life. So the issue about the politics, like, oh, maybe one day I might be that person might be on an interview panel, and and I said that there, I would say don't second guess that kind of thing. If you follow the basic guidelines and commonsensical things that Núria and I have been saying, that is, be honest, be generous, be fair, but be rigorous, then you're going to gain the respect of the field. And that's much more important than worrying about if you upset somebody or whatever. The field relies on good book reviewers. Think, if you have a book published, do you want it to be reviewed? Yes, you do. In Speculum, yes, you do. So I also will say that if you're invited to review, keep that in mind. It's kind of dispiriting when you see lots of people in a row just say too busy. It's like, we're all too busy. Sometimes you really are, but those are the kinds of things I wanted to cover. I'll just leave it there.
Thanks, Lawrence. And thanks to all of you on the review board and on the editorial board. I think all of our participants have heard the work and the dedication that you put in as editors. And I have to say that I'm so grateful. The Speculum, the journal, has really great boards who really put in a lot of energy and a lot of hard work for the field. So finally, we're going to have a few words from our publisher at the University of Chicago Press, Carrie Rohn, and she's going to speak to us, especially to those of you who are our international participants, who were the question of open access is more and more compelling these days. So, Carrie.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. All right. So first, I just wanted to sort of explain, why is a publisher involved? Maybe you think of us as the people who just print and mail the article, the journal issues. We of course support the editorial team, but one big part of our job is to really look out for authors. And authors today are interacting with more third parties like image rights holders, funders and institutions, your own institution as a sort of third party who's telling you things that you need to know about how you can publish your journal. That can be difficult and confusing. And so basically we spend a lot of time at the press keeping track of the rules and then providing guidelines. So, we're going to try to research, organize, and then update materials. So what I'm showing here on this front page is the Speculum homepage with the pull-down menu for contributors. And here you'll see everything from submit a manuscript, getting down to author's rights, what you can do with your article after it's published, obtaining permissions, how you deal with image rights holders, and then of course, open access, which is what I'm going to talk about today. You as authors may encounter restrictions for publication placed on you by governments, institutions, or funding bodies. And there are two main ways to achieve compliance. This is the quick overview. Green open access, where you are self-archiving your article in an official non-commercial repository. That is not academia.edu. It is a repository that your institution would be supportive of, or that your funder would be supportive of. This is something that you're able to do on your own. There's no cost. The other option is gold open access, where authors are essentially making their electronic version of their article freely available on the journal's website from the moment of publication in perpetuity for a fee. Green open access is the most common of compliance. And like I said, it's available to authors without intervention by the editorial office or the publisher. You would want to consult your institution or funder to see if there are requirements, even for the self-archiving, concerning version type, the embargo, the repository itself, or a license, if any. The editorial office can connect you with me or another member of our staff who will assist you with any questions. We can also provide waivers if some of our standard requirements are different than the requirements that you're encountering. The bullets below show our basic standard requirements, which is that you would be depositing, we'd like the version that you deposit to be either the published PDF of your final article or your final accepted manuscript after peer review. So not proofs of the article. If a license is required for you to put on this, that should be then in the repository, that should be the CC by NC. And then the embargo, we'd like it if you deposit after 12 months. We already are aware of funders, for instance, the Wellcome Trust requires a 6-month embargo. That's totally fine. We are able to provide those waivers. We just need you to communicate them to us. So you would initially go to the journal office, the editorial office, and then they would send you to me or one of my colleagues. Gold open access. This option is primarily for authors with research funding that absolutely mandates gold open access as a condition of publication. What you'd want to do is notify the editorial office when you're making your submission. Then again, you also want to consult the license requirements of your institution or funder after first checking to see if green OA is permissible. It often is, even if it's not the preferred method. And then The next two bullets show the fees that are involved. Our standard is under a CC by NC. That's a NC stands for non-commercial license. And that fee is US $2,500. Availability under a CC BY license. This is the least restrictive license. It allows anyone in the public to make reuse of your article in any way they want, including commercial use without seeking permission. This is problematic in a number of ways. It has a greater impact, and so therefore it carries a higher fee of $3,500. Again, here too, the editorial office will connect you with UCP staff we're more than happy to assist with questions, and then of course arrange for invoicing and payment. I did want to just quickly go through a couple more slides that are just going to show you a little bit of research that I did. In 6 years, Speculum has actually had only one author who required open access, or had a funder who required it, and then chose to do that. And so that is through UKRI. So here's the type of thing when I said consult with your license requirements, just quickly, this is what even I can see. So this is in the link below is the most recent round of updates. This is from October of last year. We totally understand that they are updating this. We're expecting to hear in 2021 sometime. And of course, we're fully prepared to be flexible and to adjust accordingly. But here you're seeing a question from their frequently asked questions. Are you able to choose the green route, even if the publisher offers gold? So we offer both green and gold. Yes, you are able to do that. And here in highlight, it shows that the embargo of 6 months is for STEM disciplines, 12 months for the arts, humanities, and social sciences, which means that it matches up directly with UCP's standard policies. Well, what repositories should I put my article into? That seems to have a lot of flexibility at the discretion of the author and the research institution. And lastly, well, what are the licenses? Here, they are very clear that if you're doing gold OA, you do need to use a CC BY license, which I discussed on the earlier slide, is the least restrictive and more expensive. However, under green, the license, the CC BY NC is totally acceptable. So here too, green is our just basic off the rack green is acceptable. Like I said, we're fully happy to prepare waivers for you. Anyway, thank you. I am here to help. The publisher actually is a nice person who wants to help you. And so I look forward to your questions and eventual emails with questions. And I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Kari, and thank you again to all of our presenters for giving us your perspectives from your perches at Speculum. So now in our time that remains, about 15 minutes, we will do our best to answer the questions that have come in through the Q&A. A number of them deal with similar themes, so we'll probably bundle them together. And maybe we'll do, at least to begin with, some back and forth between Taylor and me, that is between the articles and the book reviews. And then of course, questions that would be applicable to everyone else. I think I'll try my best to be brief in my answers so we can get through all of the questions. So, and some of these questions really do invite brief answers. So the first question was about eliminating acknowledgements when anonymizing. Yes, definitely do get rid of them all. You will have a chance to bring them back and to reinsert them once your article passes through peer review toward acceptance. I'll answer two, and then maybe Taylor will take two, and we'll go back and forth for a little while. Question about peer review. How many peer reviewers are assigned on an article? Well, generally two, but if the article is very complicated and is dealing with many different fields, we'll go up to three. And then the question becomes, do revise and resubmits, do they go back into the peer review system? And the answer is generally yes, and especially yes, if the peer reviewers were recommending many substantial revisions. If the peer reviewers had only very light revisions that they were suggesting, doesn't necessarily have to go through a full peer review process. Sometimes it will only go back to one reviewer. So the answer on this one is it really depends. It really depends on the article itself. But most often, I would say that it does go back into a full peer review cycle. So maybe Taylor, there were a couple of questions here. Do you see them, or do you need me to pose them?
Oh, no, it's fine. I've got it. Yeah, so Lawrence answered a couple of these, but I can just go back through them. The first question about, is it possible for an author whose book has been sent in for review to find out if a review is forthcoming? No, unfortunately not. There are many reasons why. A lot of times this is just simply that we want to preserve the anonymity of the process throughout, and that includes even revealing if a review is forthcoming. But it's especially to, well, I wouldn't say especially, but sometimes we do send books out for review, and we might think that a review is forthcoming, but the author doesn't submit the review, or maybe they submit a review that's not up to our standards and we have to reject it. So we never reveal if a review is forthcoming. The only time the author would find that out is when it was published. So the next question is about, is there a way to know what books are coming into the office? That's what the books received list is for. It's to inform authors that, yes, we received your book, but also if you are interested and you want to know if maybe you've checked a few of our books received lists, and your publisher sent the book to us, but it hasn't appeared, it might have been lost, or something else might be up. So we certainly welcome you contacting us directly to know, to ask if we have received your book. And how does one become a book reviewer? I think that Lawrence and Núria explained that quite well, but I would also just reiterate that we would love to hear from you directly if you're interested in serving as a reviewer. So please do send me an email and let me know what you're interested in, and especially if there is a book that you're interested in reviewing, because that's always really helpful for our editors.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll take a couple of questions and then bundle them together. And it may be that the editorial board members might want to jump in here too. These are questions about would we consider an article that is, well, here in this particular case, around Persianate, the Persianate age in India, and the sources are in Arabic. And then there was another question about China, but really it's about, these questions are about the scope of Speculum. And these are very interesting questions, because these are questions that we think about all of the time. And as you all probably know, Speculum was very much founded to be a journal that really was focusing mainly on, if I may say so, Northwestern Europe. It has, over the last generation or so, opened itself up to the Mediterranean and beyond. I think we're continuing to do that, but we do try to keep ourselves planted in the West according to our original founding mission. So we do look for articles that speak in some way to Western Europe. So if the subject matter is primarily non-Western, ordinarily we're looking for articles that deal with encounters and connections, or even comparisons. For example, the question that was asked about China. We do have an article coming out next year, which is a comparative article. It's an article that compares glossing practices between China and the West. So that kind of article is absolutely within our remit. So I would say that, you know, if you're working outside of Western Europe, try to think about how your article could speak to those whose concerns are primarily Western Mediterranean. Because remember, that is mainly our audience, our readership. So I don't know whether Cord or Cecilia have anything else they want to add to that particular answer.
I can't say I have much to add. I think I would just reiterate and emphasize what Kate has said. If there are innovative and true to the material ways to talk about the interaction between the East and the West in ways that speak to readers whose primary interest and whose primary expertise is the West, is Northwestern Europe, because we must remember that that still remains the journal's primary readership. So I think that's something to keep in mind. We would not. I just want to stress that we would not, out of hand, reject something because it's primarily seated, because its evidence is primarily seated in the world other than Western Europe. But we would be looking to see if it speaks to a readership that's been primarily interested in Western Europe. I hope that helps.
Can I just say this is a really important question, in part because of the direction of the field, in a variety of ways, sort of trying to decolonize the field, and that kind of questions both comparative and interregional ways in which we're thinking about, I think, all aspects of medieval studies. So I think there's an eagerness, I know that I would express an eagerness to read material that was not classically centered in, say, my own field of, you know, medieval Paris. The issue then is how and whether it is the questions that it is engaging in, the paradigms that it is working with, is legible to the, as Cord says, the readership that is, you know, has grown out of the traditional, you know, field of medieval studies as Speculum, in a sense, has represented it. So I think we're eager to, I'll speak for myself, but I think this is broadly representative. We're really eager to learn more about the ways in which histories outside of the traditional Northwestern European, or Christendom, you know, that sphere is able to engage the traditional questions, but it has to be legible, at least for me when I read it. The questions, the issues have to be legible in terms of the types of questions and the textures of the project that we're engaged in, for there to be a dialogue to be had.
So thank you, Cecilia. And so I would only close with, you know, I think what the board members have said, you know, is very wise, and we are always trying to keep our fingers on the pulse of the discipline. And not only sort of retrospectively, but we are also trying to lead. And so if that's where the field is going, if the field is going to the global Middle Ages, that's where we want to be as well. So, and believe me, this is something that we talk about in terms of on the board. I am going to address some questions that can be addressed very quickly because we're running out of time. Somebody asked about the revise and resubmit and the blind peer review process, and if the article is not going to be accepted and is not going to be put into the peer review process, do we hear back sooner than 6 months, 3 to 6 months? Yes, you do. You hear back within a month or 6 weeks. So we try again to release your articles back to you so you can go elsewhere. Questions about image copyrights and can I use my own photos? Generally, yes, you can use your own. Photos. These days, museums are also are much more liberal with granting rights. But if there's ever sort of a question, if it falls into a murky area, I'm usually, on email directly with Kari or UCP Press about these because we take the copyrights very seriously. But just know this, when you're submitting an article, you do not have to have all of your copyrights in place. That only comes into play when your article has been accepted and it's going into production. That's when you need to have all of your copyrights. So, and you'll have ample time in the period between acceptance and publication to get those acceptances. There was another question for Kari about open access. If one is an adjunct and not funded for research, what kind of permissions would be of concern?
Well, I saw that, and if I'm understanding it correctly, it sounds like the key thing to know is the journal is supported by subscription revenue. It is not an open, all the articles do not have to be open access. They do not all have to be paid. So if your adjunct and your institution does require, what I would expect they might require is that you deposit into their repository. That's free. That's covered by the green open access. So I think funding, and then you have no requirement if you're not funded to do gold open access. So there shouldn't be a cost there either.
Okay, thank you. Taylor, I don't know whether there's some book review questions that you'd like to get to in this last minute or two, because I think we're just about out of time.
I can't see any more of the questions. So if there's one that you see that you think needs answering, if you want to pose it to me.
I think that we have. I think that we've gotten through them. The one question, and I know that we're out of time, but it came up a few times in the questions, was word limit. And somebody even asked. Somebody's been paying close attention to the website and asked. Or noticed that they've seen our word limit change recently. And that's absolutely right. So everything that we do is always up for discussion and review. And I inherited a word limit count, and I recently brought it to the board for various reasons, and we decided to change it. And in fact, it was just changed last week. So we are now asking that submissions, that is articles, be from anywhere from 10 to 13,000 words in the body of the text, with a maximum of 18,000 words, that is with your scholarly apparatus. Know this, by the way, if you have a long appendix, you can publish that as an addendum on our website, that is on our University of Chicago Press website. So not everything, all of your appendices need to be published in print. So yes, we have changed our word limit recently, and we do, it's now a much more generous word limit, and so we would expect you to abide by it. I have generally found that articles never are slimmed down in the peer review process, that they are always bulked up in terms of word count, so better to be under than over. Okay, I think because we are at time and actually even a little bit over time, I want to thank our participants today, who I think went a very long way in demystifying the publishing process, not only at Speculum, but at other academic journals as well. And a huge thank you to the audience for all of your terrific questions. As I mentioned at the top, this video will be posted on the MAA website, and the slides, of course, will be part of that video. If you have questions that were not answered today, please, by all means, get a hold of one of the Speculum staff, and we'll be very happy to answer your questions offline. So in closing, let me just say stay safe, stay well, and bye-bye. Thank you.